When my husband died, his millionaire boss called me. "Ma'am, I found something. Come to my office now. Don't say anything to your son or daughter-in-law. You could be in danger." When I arrived, I was frozen stiff when I saw who was at the door. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment on which city you're watching from. That way I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought that after 45 years of marriage, I would feel like a stranger in my own life. But there I was, sitting in the front row at Abel's funeral, while my son Benjamin and my daughter-in-law Dahlia made all the decisions, as if I didn't exist. "Mom, let us handle this. You just worry about staying calm," Benjamin had told me that morning, in that condescending voice he'd developed over the last few years. Dahlia nodded beside him, with that fake smile that had become all too familiar. I kept quiet because I didn't have the strength to fight. Abel had died of a heart attack 3 days earlier, so suddenly that I still couldn't fully process it. One moment he was having breakfast with me, talking about the garden he wanted to plant in the spring, and the next I found him collapsed in the garage. I watched the people filling the church, Abel's co-workers, neighbors, some distant relatives. They all approached Benjamin and Dahlia to offer their condolences, as if they were the ones who had been widowed. I was just a 6-8-year-old woman who needed to be shielded from the trauma. "Grandma is very fragile," I heard Dahlia whisper to someone. "Benjamin and I are taking care of everything." Fragile. That word hurt me more than any empty condolence. Abel had never seen me as fragile. To him, I was Monica, his partner, his equal. But ever since Benjamin had married Dahlia 5 years ago, everything had gradually changed. During the service, I noticed something strange. Benjamin seemed more relieved than sad. Every time someone approached to console him, he responded with a composure that bordered on indifference. Dahlia, for her part, had tears in her eyes, but something in her expression felt calculated, as if she were acting. After the burial, at the house Abel and I had shared for so many years, people gathered for the lunch Dahlia had organized. I sat in my favorite chair by the window, watching as my daughter-in-law directed everything as if it were her own home. "Monica, you should go rest," Dahlia suggested, approaching with a cup of tea I hadn't asked for. "It's been a very long day for you." "I'm fine here," I replied, but my voice sounded weaker than I intended. Benjamin came over and sat on the sofa across from me. "Mom, Dahlia and I have been talking. We don't think you should stay alone in this house. It's too big for you. And after what happened with Dad," my blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Well," Benjamin continued, exchanging a look with Dahlia, "there are some very nice communities where you'd be safer, with people your age, activities." "I'm not going to any nursing home," I said, feeling indignation give me strength I didn't know I had. Dahlia sat next to me, taking my hand with a softness that I found unbearable. "It's not a nursing home, Monica. They're very elegant senior living communities, and we could visit you every weekend." "This is my house," I murmured, but I already felt my determination crumbling under their compassionate stares. The conversation was interrupted by the phone ringing. Benjamin got up to answer it, and I could hear his voice from the kitchen, though not the exact words. When he returned, his expression had changed. "It was someone from Dad's office," he said, sounding annoyed. "They wanted to talk to you about some papers." "What papers?" I asked. "I don't know." I told them you were indisposed, that they could sort anything out with me. Something in his tone bothered me. "Benjamin, your father worked at that company for 30 years. If they want to talk to me about something, I have a right to hear them out. Mom, don't worry about these things. We'll handle all the paperwork and legal matters." That night, after everyone had left, and Benjamin and Dahlia finally left me alone, I sat on the bed I had shared with Abel for so many years. The house was too quiet, filled with memories that now seemed distant. That's when my cell phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Mrs. Peterson," a male voice said on the other end of the line. "This is Richard Hardwell, your husband's boss at Morrison and Associates." "Mr. Hardwell," I replied, remembering the name. Abel had mentioned his boss on several occasions, always with respect. "Ma'am, I am so sorry for your loss." Abel was an extraordinary man, and everyone in the office valued him immensely. "Thank you," I murmured. There was a pause, and then his voice grew more serious. "Mrs. Peterson, I need to see you urgently. There's something you need to know about your husband's last few months. Something important. My heart began to beat faster. What kind of thing? I can't talk over the phone. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? And ma'am, it is crucial that you do not tell your son or daughter-in-law about this conversation. Abel was very specific about that. The air caught in my lungs. Why? What's going on? Please, Mrs. Peterson, come tomorrow at 10 a.m. Your husband asked me that if anything happened to him, I would make sure to speak with you, but only with you. The line went dead, and I sat in the darkness, holding the phone with trembling hands. Abel had foreseen his death. He had left specific instructions, and for some reason, those instructions included keeping Benjamin and Dahlia in the dark. For the first time since his death, I felt like my husband was speaking to me from somewhere far away, telling me to pay attention, that this was not the time to be fragile. Something was terribly wrong, and I was the only one who could find out what it was. The next morning, I woke up with a determination I hadn't felt in months. For the first time since Abel's death, I had a clear purpose. I dressed carefully, choosing the navy blue suit Abel always said made me look elegant and strong. Benjamin called early, as he had been doing since the funeral. How did you sleep, Mom? Dahlia and I were thinking, maybe you should stay with us for a few days. I'm fine, son, I replied, trying to sound normal. In fact, I have to go out this morning. There was a pause. Go out where? My mind worked quickly. To the pharmacy. I'm out of my blood pressure pills. I can bring you the pills. You don't have to go out. Benjamin, I can drive to the drugstore. I'm not an invalid. His sigh was audible through the phone. Okay, but be careful, and if you need anything, call us immediately. I drove downtown, my hands tight on the steering wheel. The Morrison & Associates building was a 20-story glass tower that had always intimidated me a little. Abel worked on the 15th floor in the internal audit department. The receptionist guided me to the executive floor, where I had never been. Richard Hardwell's office was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city, mahogany furniture, and a sense of power that filled the air. Richard Hardwell was a man of about 55, with perfectly styled gray hair, and a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He stood up when I entered, and I saw genuine concern in his eyes. Mrs. Peterson, thank you for coming. Please, sit down. I settled into one of the leather chairs in front of his desk, feeling as if I were in uncharted territory. First of all, Richard began, I want you to know that your husband was one of our most valued employees. In 30 years, we never had a single complaint about his work. Thank you, I murmured, though something in his tone told me this was just a preamble. Richard stood up and walked over to a file cabinet behind his desk. He pulled out a thick folder and placed it in front of me. Mrs. Peterson, during the last 6 months of his life, Abel came to see me on several occasions with very specific concerns. He opened the folder, revealing pages and pages of documents, handwritten notes in Abel's familiar script, and what appeared to be photographs of other documents. Concerns about what? Richard looked me directly in the eye. About his family. I felt as if the floor had moved beneath my feet. My family? Abel believed that your son and daughter-in-law were trying to manipulate him into making significant changes to his will and his bank accounts. The words didn't make sense immediately. That's impossible. Benjamin would never. Mrs. Peterson, Richard interrupted gently, were you aware that in the last 8 months, Abel received multiple visits from your son and daughter-in-law, often when you weren't home? I shook my head, but a cold feeling settled in my stomach. Did you know that they repeatedly suggested it would be better for you if he organized things so that if something happened to him, Benjamin would have immediate power of attorney over all financial and medical decisions related to you? That can't be true, I whispered. Richard opened one of the pages and turned it towards me. It was a photocopy of a partially completed legal document. I recognized Abel's signature at the bottom, but it was crossed out. Abel brought me this 3 months ago. He said Benjamin had pressured him to sign it, telling him it was for the best for the family and that it would protect you from having to make difficult decisions if he was gone. I read the first few lines of the document. It was a power of attorney transfer that would have given Benjamin total control over all our finances and my medical decisions if Abel died or became incapacitated. But he didn't sign it, I observed. No, and that's what started to worry Abel. According to what he told me, when he refused to sign it, Benjamin got very upset. He told him he was being selfish, that he wasn't thinking about what was best for you. My mind began to make connections I didn't want to make. I remembered Benjamin and Dahlia's visits over the past year, how they always seemed to be whispering about something when I entered the room. There's more, Richard continued, turning to another page. Abel also told me that Dahlia had started suggesting that you were showing signs of confusion, of memory loss. What? Apparently, she had begun commenting to both Abel and Benjamin that you were repeating stories, that you were forgetting conversations, that maybe you needed closer medical supervision. I felt as if I had been physically struck. I don't. My memory is perfectly fine. Abel knew that. That's why he started documenting everything, every conversation, every suggestion, every bit of pressure he felt from them. Richard turned several more pages, showing me detailed notes in Abel's handwriting, dates, times, transcripts of conversations. My husband had been keeping a meticulous record of what now looked like a sustained campaign to undermine his trust in me and to gain control over our lives. Why didn't he tell me anything? I asked, feeling tears I didn't know I had. He told me he didn't want to worry you until he was sure of what was happening. He was hoping he was wrong. Just then, there was a sharp knock on the office door. Richard and I turned, and my heart stopped when I saw who walked in. Benjamin and Dahlia stood in the doorway, their expressions a mixture of surprise and something darker. "Mom," Benjamin said, and his voice had a tone I had never heard before. "What are you doing here?" Dahlia stepped forward with that condescending smile I now recognized as a mask. "Monica, we were so worried when we couldn't find you at home. Why didn't you tell us you were coming here?" Richard stood up slowly, and I could see tension in every line of his body. "Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Peterson, I wasn't expecting you today." "Well," Benjamin said, walking fully into the office, as if he had every right to be there. "When Mom didn't answer her phone, we got worried, with her mental state lately." "My mental state is perfectly fine," I said, finding my voice. Dahlia came over to me and put a hand on my shoulder. "Of course it is, dear, but after losing Abel, we all understand that you might be a little confused." I looked at the open folder in front of me, then at Richard, then at my son and daughter-in-law. For the first time in months, I saw the situation with absolute clarity. "I'm not confused," I said, closing the folder with a decisive motion. "In fact, I think I'm starting to understand exactly what's been going on." The silence that followed was so tense you could cut it with a knife. And in that silence, I knew my life was about to change in ways I had never imagined. The tension in the office was palpable. Benjamin and Dahlia were looking at me with an intensity that was completely new, as if seeing me for the first time as a real threat instead of a helpless old woman. "Mom," Benjamin said, approaching slowly, "I think we should go home. You're clearly upset. And after the funeral." "I'm not going anywhere," I replied with a firmness that surprised even myself. Richard cleared his throat. "Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Peterson, this is a private conversation between your mother and me. I would appreciate it if you would respect that." Dahlia let out a forced laugh. "With all due respect, Mr. Hardwell, Monica has been very fragile since Abel's death. We don't think it's appropriate for her to be making important decisions without family supervision." "Family supervision?" I repeated, feeling the indignation rise in my chest. "I'm 68 years old, not a child." Benjamin exchanged a look with Dahlia that I didn't miss. It was the same look they had shared at the funeral, heavy with a meaning I didn't understand. "Of course you're not a child, Mom," Benjamin said, but his tone was the same one he would use with a troublesome child. "It's just that we want to protect you from people who might take advantage of your grief." I glanced at Richard, who had remained silent, watching the exchange with a serious expression. Then I looked at the closed folder on the desk, knowing it held information that would change everything. "Richard," I said, using his first name deliberately, "could you give me a few minutes to speak with my son and daughter-in-law?" He nodded. "Of course, I'll be right outside." Once he left, the atmosphere in the room changed completely. Benjamin visibly relaxed as if he had won something important. "Mom, I don't know what that man has been telling you, but you have to understand that people can be very manipulative when there's money involved." "Money?" I asked. Dahlia sat in the chair next to me. "Monica, dear, we know Abel had a considerable life insurance policy, and with the house and his savings, there are unscrupulous people who prey on widows." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. How do you know about Abel's life insurance? Benjamin and Dahlia exchanged another one of those loaded glances. Well, Benjamin said, looking uncomfortable for the first time. Dad mentioned it a few months ago when we were talking about making sure you were taken care of if something happened to him. That's strange, I said slowly, because Abel never mentioned those conversations to me. The silence stretched between us. It was then that I heard a sound that made my world stop completely. A cough I would have recognized anywhere in the world. All three of us turned towards the door of the private bathroom connected to Richard's office. The door opened slowly, and a figure emerged that made my heart stop and then start beating so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Abel. My husband, the man I had buried 4 days ago, was standing there alive, breathing, looking at me with a mixture of love and apology in his eyes. "Hello, Monica," he said softly. I think I screamed. I'm not sure. What I do remember is the world starting to spin around me, and if Abel hadn't rushed towards me, I would have fallen out of my chair. "What? How?" I murmured, touching his face with trembling hands to make sure he was real. Behind us, I heard Dahlia let out a choked gasp and Benjamin mutter a word I'd rather not repeat. Abel held me gently, his familiar hands steadying me as they had for 45 years. "I'm sorry, my love. I'm so sorry I had to put you through this, but it was the only way." "The only way for what?" I asked, though a part of me was already starting to understand. Abel looked up at Benjamin and Dahlia, and his expression hardened in a way I had never seen before. "The only way to protect you from them." Benjamin found his voice first. "This is impossible. You're dead. We saw you. There was a funeral. There's a death certificate." Abel straightened up but kept a protective arm around me. There was a forged death certificate, with the help of a very discreet doctor and a funeral director who owed me a few favors. Richard helped me arrange everything. "But why?" I whispered. Abel looked at me tenderly before turning back to Benjamin and Dahlia. "Because I found out what you two were planning." Dahlia turned pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" Abel said, walking to the desk and opening the folder Richard had closed. "Then you won't recognize this?" He pulled out a series of documents and laid them on the desk. Even from where I was sitting, I could see they were copies of emails, text messages, and what looked like transcribed recordings. "Benjamin," Abel read aloud, "Mom is starting to show signs of dementia. I think you should consider that she might need full-time care soon. If Dad signs the papers I prepared, we can make sure she gets the best care possible when the time comes." My son had gone completely white. Abel continued reading. Dahlia agreed. "And the sooner the better. The house alone is worth almost $500,000, and that's not even counting his retirement savings." I sat down heavily, feeling as if I'd been physically hit. They had been planning to declare me incompetent. They had been calculating the value of our home, our savings. "This is taken out of context," Benjamin said desperately. "We were worried about Mom. We just wanted to make sure." "Make sure of what?" Abel interrupted. "That you could control her life? That you could declare her incompetent and put her in an institution while you sold the house and spent our savings?" Dahlia stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous, Abel. Faking your own death is a crime. There are fake certificates, fraudulent documents." "You're right," Abel said calmly. "And I'm prepared to face the consequences. But first, I wanted Monica to know the truth about what you've been planning." He came to me and took my hands. "My love, for the last 8 months, they have been visiting me regularly when you're not around. At first I thought it was because they cared about us, but gradually I realized that every conversation was designed to convince me that you were losing your mental capacity, that you needed supervision, that it would be selfish of me not to make legal arrangements to protect you." I looked at Benjamin, my son, the baby I had held in my arms, whom I had comforted through nightmares, whom I had loved unconditionally for 35 years. "Is that true?" I asked him. For a moment, I saw something in his eyes that might have been shame, but then it hardened. "Mom, you don't understand the financial pressures we're under. Dahlia and I have debts, obligations." "So it was true," I murmured. Abel squeezed my hands. When I realized what was happening, I hired a private investigator. We discovered that Benjamin has over $150,000 in gambling debts. Dahlia has been using credit cards in your name without your knowledge. The world swayed around me once more. Credit cards in my name? 3 different cards, Abel said softly, with a total debt of $42,000. Dahlia finally exploded. This is enough, Abel. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but this ends now. Monica, let's go. Your husband has clearly lost his mind. But I didn't move. For the first time in months, maybe years, everything made sense. The constant visits, the exaggerated concern for my well-being, the suggestions about my memory, the rush to have me make decisions about my future immediately after the funeral. They hadn't been taking care of me. They had been preparing me for slaughter. I'm not going anywhere, I said finally, my voice stronger than it had sounded in a long time, but I think you two should leave. The expression on Benjamin's face changed to something I had never seen before. He was no longer my concerned son. He was a stranger who had just lost something he had been counting on as his own. Abel helped me to the office sofa while Richard returned with a bottle of water and a grave expression. Benjamin and Dahlia remained standing near the door, like cornered animals deciding whether to flee or attack. Monica, Abel said softly, kneeling in front of me, there's more you need to know. My mind was still struggling to process that my husband was alive, that he had faked his death, that my son and daughter-in-law had been plotting to steal everything from me for months. But something in Abel's expression told me the worst was yet to come. More? I murmured. Richard opened another section of the folder and pulled out what looked like a series of photographs. He placed them on the coffee table in front of us. These photos were taken by the private investigator over the last 6 weeks, Abel explained. I picked up the photos with trembling hands. The first showed Benjamin entering what looked like a casino. The second showed him at a poker table, betting chips that represented amounts of money I couldn't imagine. The third showed Dahlia in an expensive jewelry store, trying on a necklace that cost more than our mortgage payment. Benjamin, Abel said, his voice as cold as ice, do you want to explain to your mother how you could bet $25,000 in a single night when you told me you needed help paying your mortgage? My son didn't answer, but I could see his jaw tighten. Abel continued. Or maybe Dahlia can explain how she could buy a $5,000 necklace last week when you're supposedly struggling to make ends meet. Dahlia finally spoke, her voice now stripped of all the fake sweetness she had been using with me. Abel, you don't know what you're talking about. That necklace was a replica. A replica from Tiffany & Co.? Richard asked, pulling a receipt from the folder. Because we have the receipt right here, paid for with a credit card in the name of Monica Peterson. I felt as if I had been slapped. You used my name to buy jewelry? Monica, Dahlia said, and for the first time, her mask cracked completely. You don't understand. Benjamin and I are under a lot of pressure. His debts, our expenses. We just needed a little temporary help. Temporary? I repeated. How long have you been stealing from me? Abel pulled out another document. According to our investigator, the fraudulent transactions began a 1.5 years ago. They've used your information to open 3 credit cards. They've made unauthorized withdrawals from your savings account totaling $30,000, and they've been intercepting your bank statements so you wouldn't notice. Intercepting my mail? Remember when Dahlia offered to help you with the mail a few months ago? Abel asked. When she said it would be easier if she handled organizing all your bills and important documents, the memory hit me like a lightning bolt. Dahlia had been so sweet, so helpful. Monica, dear, I know these financial things can be confusing. Why don't you let me handle organizing everything for you? Abel has so much work, and you have enough to worry about. But that's not the worst of it, Abel continued, his expression growing even darker. What could be worse than this? I asked. Abel looked Benjamin straight in the eye. Tell your mother about the plan for the nursing home. Benjamin turned completely pale. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Said Richard, pulling a small recorder from his desk. Because we have this. He pressed the play button, and Benjamin's voice filled the office. It was a phone conversation, likely recorded without his knowledge. Dahlia, we need to speed up the timeline. Dad is starting to ask questions, and Mom isn't acting as confused as we'd hoped. Dahlia's voice responded from the recorder. I already spoke with the director at Sunset Manor. Did you say you have the medical documents we need? The forged documents are ready. Once Mom is admitted, we can sell the house immediately. The market is hot right now. I felt like I was falling off a cliff. Forged medical documents. The recording continued. And what if Abel objects? Dahlia asked. Abel isn't going to be a problem for much longer, Benjamin replied, and something in his tone made my blood run cold. Abel paused the recording and looked at me with eyes full of pain. That conversation was recorded 3 weeks ago, Monica. 3 weeks before my death. The silence in the office was deafening. I looked at Benjamin, trying to find some explanation, some way this wasn't what it sounded like. Abel isn't going to be a problem for much longer, I repeated slowly. What does that mean, Benjamin? My son finally spoke, but his voice was that of a stranger. Mom, you're misinterpreting everything. We were just worried about Dad. His blood pressure had been high. He'd been under a lot of stress. Are you saying you were waiting for me to die naturally? Abel asked, standing up. Dahlia stepped forward, all pretense abandoned. Abel, don't be dramatic. We were just being realistic about the future. Monica is going to need care eventually, and it's better to plan ahead. Plan ahead, I repeated, or speed up the process? Richard pulled another document from the folder. Monica, this might be the hardest thing to hear. It was a medical report. I read the first few lines with growing horror. Patient shows clear signs of early onset dementia. Episodes of confusion, short-term memory loss, disorientation. Evaluation for full-time care is recommended. This is a lie, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I've never seen this doctor, Dr. Marcus Henley. I don't recognize this name. He's Dahlia's doctor, Abel said. Someone who was willing to sign a fake diagnosis in exchange for $10,000. I looked at Dahlia, the woman I had called my daughter for 5 years. You paid a doctor to say I have dementia? Monica, Dahlia said, and for the first time I could see real panic in her eyes. You have to understand, we were trying to protect you. Protect me from what? I yelled, surprised by the force of my own voice. From yourself, Benjamin shouted back. Mom, you're old. Your mind isn't what it used to be. Dahlia and I can see things you can't see. Abel stepped between Benjamin and me. Monica has no mental problems. The only problem here is that you two have been gaslighting a 6-8-year-old woman for over a year, making her question her own reality so you could steal her money and her house. Gaslighting? What? I asked. Gaslighting, Richard explained. It's a form of psychological manipulation where someone makes you doubt your own perception of reality. Abel sat next to me and took my hands. My love, do you remember a few months ago when you couldn't find your car keys? And Dahlia suggested that maybe you'd lost them because your memory wasn't what it used to be? I nodded. It had been so distressing. We found the keys in Dahlia's purse, Abel said softly. She had taken them. And remember when you couldn't find your blood pressure medication? And Benjamin said you'd probably forgotten where you put it? My heart began to pound faster. Yes, it was in Benjamin's car too. One by one, Abel began to explain situations that I had interpreted as signs of my mental decline. The day I couldn't find my wallet, the time I was late for an appointment because I was sure it was at a different time, the occasions when I couldn't remember conversations I was certain I'd had. They had all been orchestrated. For months, Abel said, they have been systematically making you doubt your own mind, preparing the ground to have you declared incompetent. I looked at Benjamin and Dahlia, these two people I had loved and trusted. Why? I whispered. We're family. Dahlia laughed, a bitter sound I had never heard from her before. Family? Monica, you and Abel have been an obstacle for us since the day we got married, sitting in this huge house, hoarding money you never use, while Benjamin and I struggle every month. You never asked us for help, I said weakly. We didn't want your help, Benjamin said. We wanted what was ours. What's yours? We're your family. Benjamin exploded. That house should be ours. That money should be ours. You're going to die soon anyway. The silence that followed those words was absolute. In that moment, I knew I had lost my son forever. The person standing in front of me was a stranger who had been using my love against me, counting the days until my death so he could cash in. But I also knew something else. For the first time in over a year, my mind was completely clear. I wasn't confused. I didn't have dementia. I was the victim of a cruel and systematic conspiracy carried out by the two people I trusted most. And now that I knew the truth, I would never be the same again. The following days were an emotional roller coaster I will never forget. Abel stayed in a discreet hotel while Richard helped us navigate the legal complications of his resurrection. I returned home, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a prisoner in my own life. Benjamin and Dahlia had left Richard's office that day in a state of shock and fury. I hadn't heard from them for 48 hours until they showed up at my door on a Wednesday morning. I saw them arrive from the living room window. Benjamin walked with that determination I recognized from his childhood when he had done something wrong and was determined to convince me it wasn't his fault. Dahlia followed, but something in her posture told me that this time the strategy would be different. I opened the door before they knocked. "Hello, Mom," Benjamin said, his voice having that carefully controlled quality he used when trying to manage a difficult situation. "Benjamin, Dahlia." My voice sounded colder than I intended, but I didn't try to soften it. "Can we come in?" Dahlia asked. "We need to talk." I let them in but didn't invite them to sit. We stood in the living room that had witnessed so many happy family gatherings and now felt like a battlefield. "Mom," Benjamin began, "we've been thinking a lot about what happened at the office. I'm sure you have." Dahlia stepped forward. "Monica, I think there are a lot of misunderstandings here. Yes, Benjamin and I have been worried about your well-being, but everything we did was with the best of intentions." "The best intentions?" I repeated. "Like using my name to open credit cards?" "Those cards were for emergencies," Benjamin said quickly. "Expenses that might come up related to your care." "Like a $5,000 necklace?" Dahlia sighed. "Okay, I made a mistake. But Monica, you have to understand the pressure we've been under. Benjamin's debts, our expenses." "Your debts are not my responsibility," I said, surprised by how easy it was to say those words. Benjamin changed tactics. "Mom, Dad is manipulating you. Don't you think it's strange that he faked his own death? What kind of man does that? The kind of man who is trying to protect his wife from a son who is planning to steal everything from her." "We weren't stealing," Benjamin exploded. "That house, that money, it was eventually going to be ours anyway. We were just trying to speed up the process because we needed help now." The brutal honesty of that statement left me speechless for a moment. "Benjamin," I said finally, "are you telling me you've been waiting for Abel and me to die so you could have our money?" "It's not like it sounds," Dahlia intervened desperately. "All families plan for the future. Families don't plan to have their parents declared incompetent with fake medical diagnoses." Dahlia turned pale. That was just a precaution in case you really did need care in the future. A precaution you paid $10,000 for." Benjamin ran his hands through his hair, a sign he was losing patience. "Mom, listen to yourself. You've become paranoid. Dad is filling your head with crazy ideas." "Crazy ideas?" I repeated. "Like the idea that I deserve to live in my own house without someone trying to have me declared insane?" "Nobody is trying to have you declared insane," Benjamin yelled. I walked to the phone and dialed a number I had memorized. "What are you doing?" Dahlia asked. "Calling Abel," I replied. "I think he should be here for this conversation." "Mom, no," Benjamin said, but it was too late. Abel arrived 20 minutes later. He had been waiting for my call, probably knowing this moment would come. When he walked in, the tension in the room immediately intensified. "Benjamin, Dahlia," he greeted in a neutral voice. "Dad," Benjamin said, "we need to sort this out as a family." Abel sat next to me on the sofa, automatically taking my hand. "I'm listening." Dahlia sat in the chair across from us, assuming her most vulnerable posture. "Abel, I know what we did looks bad, but you have to understand we were desperate." "Explain desperate to me," Abel said. Benjamin began to talk quickly, the words tumbling out as if he'd been rehearsing this speech. "The debts piled up faster than we expected. The casino. I know it was stupid, but I thought I could win big. And when that didn't work, we panicked." "So you decided to steal from your parents?" Abel asked. "It's not stealing," Benjamin yelled. "You have more money than you'll ever be able to spend. That house is too big for two people. We were just advancing the inheritance." "Advancing the inheritance by declaring me incompetent?" I asked. Dahlia started to cry. Not real tears, but the kind of calculated crying I had seen her use on other occasions when she wanted to get something. "Monica, we never wanted to hurt you. We just wanted to ensure you were cared for and that we could pay our debts. We thought we could manage both." "By stealing my money and locking me in a home," I said. "It wasn't a home," Benjamin said. Sunset Manor is a very nice retirement community. You would have been comfortable there. Against my will. You would have adapted eventually, Dahlia murmured. The silence that followed was absolute. I think it was in that moment that even they realized how monstrous what they had been planning sounded. Abel stood up slowly. Benjamin, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. My son looked up, and for a moment I saw a flash of the boy he had once been. Your mother and I have decided that you are no longer a part of our lives, Abel said, his voice firm but emotionless. We don't want to see you, we don't want to hear from you, and we definitely don't want you to have access to any of our finances or property. Benjamin jumped to his feet. You can't do that. I'm your son. You are my biological son, Abel corrected. But you stopped being my family the day you decided that our deaths would be more convenient for you than our lives. Dahlia also stood, her crying now completely abandoned. This is ridiculous. Abel, Monica, you can't just cut us off completely. We're family. No, I said, standing up as well. Family doesn't try to steal. Family doesn't try to make their loved ones doubt their own sanity. Family doesn't count the days until you die so they can collect your money. Benjamin looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. You know what, Mom? Maybe you're right. Maybe this is better for everyone. Because I was tired of pretending I cared when all I really wanted was for you to get out of the way. Those words hit me like a physical slap, but strangely, they also freed me. All the love, all the guilt, all the hope that there might have been some misunderstanding evaporated in that moment. Get out, I said simply. Get your things out of my house and get out. With pleasure, Benjamin said, but this isn't over. We're going to fight this. We'll prove Dad faked his death, that you're not competent to make decisions. Abel smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Go ahead, and when you do, make sure you explain to the judge why you were planning to have your mother declared incompetent with forged medical documents. I'm sure he'll be very interested to hear about that. Benjamin and Dahlia looked at each other, and I could see the panic growing in their eyes as they realized they had no exit strategy. This isn't over, Benjamin muttered, but his voice had lost all its conviction. Yes, it is, I said. It ends right here. I watched them go, knowing it would probably be the last time I would ever see my son. I should have felt sadness, but all I felt was a deep, clean relief. For the first time in over a year, I was free. 6 months later, I'm sitting on the porch of our new house, watching Abel plant the roses in the garden he'd always dreamed of having. We moved to a small town 3 hours away, where no one knows our story and where we can just be Abel and Monica, a retired couple enjoying their golden years. The transition wasn't easy. There were moments, especially in the first few weeks, when I would wake up in the middle of the night wondering if we had done the right thing. Cutting Benjamin off completely felt like amputating a part of myself, no matter how infected it was. But Abel constantly reminded me why we had made that decision. My love, he would say when he found me crying at night, you can't save someone who is willing to destroy you. Richard had helped us handle the legal complications. Faking the death certificate resulted in some fines and community service for Abel. But when the evidence of Benjamin and Dahlia's conspiracy was presented, the judge was surprisingly understanding. I've seen many cases of elder financial abuse, he had told us during the hearing, but rarely one as systematic and cruel as this. Benjamin and Dahlia tried to make good on their threat to fight us legally, but their case fell apart quickly when the district attorney decided to investigate the fraudulent credit cards and forged medical documents. In the end, they were the ones facing criminal charges, not us. The last I heard, Benjamin was serving 18 months of probation for financial fraud, and Dahlia had lost her nursing license. They had divorced 6 weeks after everything came to light, each blaming the other for dragging them into such a desperate situation. I don't feel satisfaction in their downfall, only a strange sense of closure, like when you finish reading a disturbing book and can finally set it aside. We sold the large house where we had raised Benjamin. It was too full of complicated memories and, frankly, they were right about one thing. It was too big for 2 people. With the money from the sale, we bought this smaller house in a town called Hope, with enough land for Abel's garden and a view of the mountains that makes every sunrise feel like a gift. We also paid off all the debts that Benjamin and Dahlia had accrued in our name. Not because we owed it to them, but because we wanted to start this new phase of our lives completely clean, with no financial ties to our past. Do you think Benjamin will ever understand what he did? I ask Abel one evening as we're making dinner together. Abel stops chopping vegetables and looks at me with those wise eyes that I fell in love with 46 years ago. I don't know, my love, but it's not our responsibility to teach him anymore. That is the hardest lesson I've learned in these past months. For 35 years, I felt responsible for Benjamin's happiness and well-being. Even when he became an adult, even when he got married, he was still my baby who needed protection and guidance. But some adults choose paths their parents cannot follow, and sometimes the truest love is knowing when to let them go. We've made new friends here. Clara and Robert, the couple who live next door, invited us to dinner last week. During the conversation, Clara mentioned that they had cut ties with their son 10 years ago. He was an addict, she explained simply. And every time we tried to help, he just dragged us down into his chaos. In the end, we had to choose between saving our marriage and our sanity, or continuing to be victims of his destruction. Was it hard? I asked. Robert took Clara's hand. It was the hardest decision of our lives. But it was also the one that saved us. I hadn't realized until that moment how much I needed to hear that we weren't the only parents who had to make such an extreme decision. This morning, Abel brought me coffee in bed, a routine we've developed in our new life. As I was sipping my first cup, I noticed he'd left a letter on the nightstand. "What's this?" I asked. "It came yesterday. It's from Benjamin." My heart stopped for a moment. "Did you read it?" "No. It's for you." I held the letter for several minutes before opening it. The handwriting was the same one I'd seen on thousands of Mother's Day cards, but the words were from a stranger. "Mom," it began, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to tell you something. Dahlia and I are divorced." She blamed everything that happened on my gambling debts, but I know the truth is more complicated than that. He went on to explain that he was in therapy, that he was trying to understand how he had gotten to the point of conspiring against his own parents. The therapist says I have entitlement issues, that I've always felt I deserved things without working for them. We've made new friends here. Clara and Robert, the couple who live next door, invited us to dinner last week. During the conversation, Clara mentioned that they had cut ties with their son 10 years ago. He was an addict, she explained simply. And every time we tried to help, he just dragged us down into his chaos. In the end, we had to choose between saving our marriage and our sanity, or continuing to be victims of his destruction. Was it hard? I asked. Robert took Clara's hand. It was the hardest decision of our lives. But it was also the one that saved us. I hadn't realized until that moment how much I needed to hear that we weren't the only parents who had to make such an extreme decision. And if he never does? I looked out the window towards the garden, where the roses Abel had planted were beginning to bloom. Then we will live a beautiful life without him. He got to the point near the end. I'm not asking for your forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did, and I understand why you had to walk away from me. If you ever want to give me another chance, I'll be working to be the person I should have been all along. That afternoon, while Abel was working in the garden, I decided to write my own letter, not to Benjamin, but to myself, a kind of declaration of independence from the guilt I had been carrying. Dear 8-year-old Monica, I wrote, forgive yourself for loving so much that it almost cost you everything. Forgive yourself for trusting so much that it almost cost you your sanity. Forgive yourself for believing that family love is always unconditional, but also celebrate your strength. That night, as Abel and I were getting ready for sleep in our new room with a view of the mountains, he asked me, "Do you regret anything? Cutting him off completely?" "No," I answered without hesitation. "Not seeing the signs sooner, sometimes. And faking my death?" I smiled. It was dramatic, but effective. Abel laughed. Definitely effective. We lay in silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of the night in our new home. "You know what's the strangest thing?" I said finally. "What's that?" "I feel younger now than I did when I was 50. Like I've been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there." Abel took my hand in the dark. "That's what happens when you stop living for other people and start living for yourself." This morning, I got a call from Clara, our new neighbor. "Monica," she said, "a group of us are going to the farmer's market on Saturday, and then we were thinking of having lunch at that new French cafe. Would you like to come?" "I'd love to," I replied without hesitation. A year ago, I would have had to check with Benjamin and Dahlia, make sure they didn't need anything, and consider if it was appropriate for a woman my age to be going out with friends. Now, I just say yes to the things that make me happy. As I write these lines, sitting on my porch with a cup of tea and the sound of Abel whistling as he waters his roses, I realize that this is the first time in decades that I feel completely free. Free from guilt, free from expectations, free from the need to justify my choices to people who never had my best interests at heart. Benjamin was right about one thing. Abel and I probably won't live for many more years. But the years we have left will be ours, lived on our own terms, surrounded by people who love us without conditions and without hidden agendas. And that, I've discovered, is worth more than any toxic family relationship I might have lost in the process. Sometimes the greatest freedom comes from having the courage to walk into the unknown, leaving behind even those you loved most when that love had become indistinguishable from harm. Tonight, I will sleep soundly for the first time in 2 years, knowing that tomorrow I will wake up to a life that is entirely my own.